Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Northern Dispatch. We're only 2 weeks into 2025, and this year has already been insane. We're kind of at that stage now where we're looking at a year that may be one of the most insane years in Canadian history, and I think it's safe to say that, and it's only been 2 weeks. Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation, or more accurately, his intention to resign within 3 or so months. We're not exactly sure what that timeline is going to look like. We also have renewed threats from the incoming president. We are about a week and a half away from him taking back the White House, and he is already saying that he's going to annex Canada through economic force. So everything is just going swimmingly in this country. And we've got some comments to read out from our show. I believe it's 3 weeks ago. We had to take a pause last week, and we've got these comments here now. We've got this one from Henry Sams 7174. I believe that no news agency should be government funded. And I think most Canadians would agree with you there, Henry. No public funding for news agencies in this country.
So we have Heather 1991. They aren't journalists, they're activists. And this is I think what Canadians are feeling across many of the mainstream media outlets, because what they're seeing isn't unbiased. It is extremely biased, and especially when you see some of these news agencies actively manipulating footage to make certain political parties or certain political leaders look poorly, how can you think anything but?
And then we have Jim Spence 1741 saying news outlets should report the news, not create it. Absolutely. When you are reporting the news, when you are behind the camera, you should be behind the camera. The news should be what's happening in front of you, not you yourself.
Well, and if the news agency ends up becoming the story, you know you're doing something wrong.
Amen to that. Absolutely. I think we have to rearrange the way we do these poll questions to the audience guys, because I think we're proposing questions that are almost too obvious, but because we've done it, we're going to have to read out the results, and hopefully this next poll question might get us some more variety. Last episode's poll question was, is Justin Trudeau intentionally manipulating the economy for political points? Yes, 97.7%. Of course, what a surprise there. Who could have seen that one coming? Let's see if we can get some variety here in this question. The poll question, which you can find in the pinned comment of this video, is this: will the court uphold prorogation in the upcoming court challenge of the prorogation? I'm having trouble with that word, guys. I apologize. But Ryan, why don't I just ask you that question right now? We know that there is now a court challenge to Justin Trudeau's prorogation. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, this is the whole interesting answer to this question is I don't know. And the reason why I don't know is because this is unprecedented, this type of challenge in Canada. And the lawyers that are actually bringing this challenge are actually relying on a case from the UK back in 2019 when Boris Johnson prorogued Parliament, or tried to, when the whole Brexit deal was going on. And the argument in that challenge was that there's a crisis facing the country. You are preventing parliamentarians from actually debating the issue, addressing the issue, and you're doing this for partisan reasons to save your party, not for the actual, betterment of the country, or not following normal procedural practices. So the judgment from the UK Supreme Court actually stated that the Supreme Court justices found that Boris Johnson was frustrating members of Parliament by actually proroguing. And that's going to be probably the one and only case law precedent that is going to be brought to bear here. So there's going to be some interesting discussion in terms of, does this apply? Our court systems are in some cases very different than the UK system. Our parliamentary system is very similar, but not exact. So the other question is which judge is going to be sitting in front of this? Which judges? Our Supreme Court is made up primarily of Liberal appointed judges. Is that going to play a factor? We hope not. But it's going to come down to, I don't know, we're just going to have to see how this plays out and see if the legal arguments are upheld in the merit.
So the case really comes down to, whether or not one is allowed to close down Parliament in a national crisis when the people need a Parliament, when the people need a Parliament to keep the government going. I would argue, Tonya, that we're facing a national crisis right now. We are looking at a situation in which our economy could be entirely destroyed by a massive tariff from the United States. Does it feel as though the Prime Minister has simply abandoned his post at a time when the country actually needs a Prime Minister, no matter how popular or unpopular he is?
Well, I think there's multiple crises that are kind of happening at the same time here. The crisis you're speaking about is the crisis of Trump coming into office and threatening these tariffs against Canada. I think absolutely we need a government in power at the time that can handle that. But during prorogation, the ministers are still kind of there. They're in the background. They're not really doing the full amount of work that they would because we're not legislating, right? Parliament, the House of Commons and the Senate are both not sitting. But they don't just abandon post. Like, Ottawa's not completely empty. There are people there to keep the lights on, mainly the ministers. Now, the other crisis that's happening right now is the crisis within the Liberal Party itself. And I think the question is it fair for the Prime Minister to prorogue Parliament knowing that he's facing a confidence vote? Because on the 7th, which was the day after the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament, the Conservatives and the other opposition parties were going to work on a motion to bring it to the House to request a non-confidence vote. So that would have toppled the government. Is Trudeau avoiding a non-confidence vote? And is he using prorogation to the party's benefit in order to take some time off, essentially, and have a Liberal leadership race while the opposition parties cannot vote non-confidence because Parliament is prorogued? So are they essentially choosing the next leader without the ability for the opposition to take the House down?
Well, and the other thing that I'll jump in there on the 25% tariffs, Harrison, is that it's a multifaceted issue, because if there wasn't, let's say the election wasn't going to be held for 2 more years and this was a majority government and Trudeau prorogued Parliament, it wouldn't be as bad, because you at least would have Donald Trump negotiating with a government that he knew was the government of Canada, wasn't going anywhere, and at least from a stability point of view, it's a position of strength. The issue here is that everyone can see that this government can fall at any time if there is an opportunity for a confidence vote. And Donald Trump and his administration will know that anyone he's talking to in government right now doesn't really have the authority to speak for the government, because it's going to die within a few months anyway. So this whole thing, prorogation's an issue in that you're delaying the election to actually put in a new government with a strong mandate that would be able to, I would say, have meaningful negotiations with Donald Trump, and it would actually probably make a lot of this behavior that Donald Trump is exhibiting right now here disappear, because he's taking advantage of weakness, he sees what's going on, and he's trying to exploit it.
And we're going to get into that later on in the show because it's significant. It requires attention. But on this crisis unfolding in the Liberal Party right now, we talk about how, yes, the cabinet ministers are still going to be around and still going to be able to look over their files, but also several of them are trying to become the next prime minister. They're trying to win the next Liberal leadership race with all these different questions about who can vote in the Liberal leadership race, what that's going to look like. What are you guys seeing in terms of who is going to be that next leader, the next prime minister of our country?
I honestly don't think there's any obvious front runner. Like, when Pierre had his leadership race back in 2022, I remember seeing the video on Facebook and going, that's the man that's going to be our next prime minister. He's going to lead the opposition and then he's going to become prime minister. Like, it was very obvious to me. And it was also very obvious to the voters in the leadership convention. He won with, like, I think something like 70% of the vote. It was a huge share. He won in the first round. Now, with the Liberal leaders, all these folks that are starting to come forward, they're coming out of the woodwork. I really don't see a strong contender for leader.
Well, and the other thing too is anyone that is a current sitting MP if they become Liberal leader, they're going to get trounced in the election, because the automatic argument coming from every opposition party is, you were here, you voted for all these policies, you're just as bad as Justin Trudeau, case closed. Now, the other issue is that anyone that is coming in from the outside, they have a better chance of actually running in the election. We just saw, I believe it was Frank Baylis who just announced his, well, as much as you can announce, he is intending on running for leader of the Liberal Party. Mark Carney is considering it. And Christy Clark has said that she's interested. So those are the current outsiders that we are aware of. The issue is that Trudeau has turned this Liberal brand into Trudeauism almost. He's redefined what it means to be a Liberal, and it's attached to all of these far left policies that have destroyed the country. So when you're coming in, and we saw this with Baylis on CTV, when they asked him, are you going to get rid of the carbon tax? He has to say no, because that has become an identity of the Liberal Party. So he didn't really say no, but he didn't say, yes, he's going to get rid of it.
Well, but we have to remember Baylis isn't a complete outsider. He hasn't been in politics for a number of years, but he was in the Liberal caucus from 2015 to 2019. So he helped lay the groundwork for Trudeau's government.
Does anybody really know who that guy is? I mean, when it comes to
No.
name recognition, I saw it and I'm like, okay, who's that? Obviously, it doesn't matter because he won't win in a field with, a Freeland and a Mark Carney. That's the thing, right? It's talk about a long shot candidacy. But yeah, it's interesting because, of course, you would think that anybody with some level of political instinct would realize the carbon tax is an absolute no-go, right? If you start embracing the carbon tax, you're gonna lose no matter what.
Yeah, that's the slippery slope. To look, they agree with the carbon tax, they're going to agree with every other policy.
Yeah, and why anyone who is an outsider technically would actually still defend that policy is astonishing. It shows they have basically zero political instinct and zero hope, I think, of becoming the next leader of the Liberal Party. And I just can't for the life of me understand why someone of the caliber of Mark Carney would want to become the temporary prime minister. Maybe it's due to a very serious amount of patriotism and love of the country, and feels like, I can help out for the next 2 months by being the prime minister. But honestly, are any of the politicians really like that?
We don't get a sense that these are. If I were to pick one that would be the quote-unquote front runner, so, the least rotten of the rotten fruit, it would probably be Chrystia Freeland riding on the coattails of her girl power, exit. But I don't think that's going to go very far. This is probably going to be a many round selection of a Liberal Party leader. You have Mark Carney. He's problematic. If he's as smart as everybody says he is, he needs to wait until after the election and then start a leadership bid to wrestle this party from the ashes.
Yeah, because if he goes now, he's going down with the sinking ship. Like, the Liberals have not hit rock bottom yet. They are on their way, but they haven't done it yet. And if Mark Carney tries to come in and take over the party as leader, unfortunately, he's going to do very, very poorly in the next election.
Yeah.
So I don't know why he wouldn't wait.
Well, and Dominic LeBlanc also announced today that he's not going to be running for the leader of the Liberal Party, which, if he was, I would have put him as probably the most sensible one.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, to me, he was the person that I think would have been the best suited to see through the rest of the mandate and to put up some kind of challenge at an election. But again, we have to think about the situation the country is in right now. The fact is, regardless of who the Liberal Party selects, that prime minister, without any mandate, without any confidence of the Parliament, will still have to lead this country for a few months and still have to represent this country at a time in which our country is entering a very strange period in our history, I believe. There are significant issues, and if you are at the helm, even if it is for 4 months, you have to be competent. You have to be serious. So maybe there is an argument to say someone like Mark Carney, he comes in, right? He takes over the party, knowing that they're going to lose, but they say, okay, you're going to take over, but you're going to hold on at least until the next federal election. We're going to give you a next kick at the can as sort of the top caliber candidate. I just don't see anyone else who has the name recognition, has the background, and has the ability to be a serious candidate other than Mark Carney.
Well, and the other thing to consider is they're not even going to have a couple months, right? So how this will play out is, since Justin Trudeau is the interim prime minister until a new leader is chosen, what's going to happen is, let's say the Liberal Party somehow gets a leadership race done and over with by March 24th, when prorogation is set to end. Okay, fine. So they get that, let's say, in the second week of March. All right, new prime minister, great. The prorogation ends on March 24th. A throne speech is going to be given, and then the government will fall immediately thereafter in the confidence votes. So they're going to be basically prime minister formally for about a week or two, and then they're going to go to an election. Now they're technically prime minister through the election because the government still has to function, but that's going to be it. And so until then, we're going to be saddled with Justin Trudeau and his weak cabinet to deal with this. How much damage is going to be done as a result of that, we will have to see. But if they had more time, and again, if Justin Trudeau had worked with the Liberal Party to figure this out ahead of time, you would have been correct. That the new prime minister would have had maybe 3 or 4 months to kind of get their feet wet, get some control over Parliament, at least give Canadians a demonstration of what they might have been in power after the next election, and maybe they would have had a better shot. But Justin Trudeau has completely sabotaged the Liberal Party going into the next election and probably for the next 4 to 8 years.
Now let's look ahead just to what these challenges are going to be that are going to face Pierre Poilievre when he becomes prime minister, which is looking very likely, and what these next few months are going to look like for Canada. If we were assuming that the threat of a 25% tariff on all Canadian products entering the United States was a bluff or a negotiating tactic, I think that the press conference we heard from Donald Trump earlier this week, in which he said that he would use economic force to annex Canada, I'm pretty sure that tariff is coming into place, and I'm pretty sure it's going to have devastating effects. What exactly do you think that's going to look like, and how that's going to play out over the next few months? I don't even know if we've actually lived through something like this, but I would imagine immediate pain and also some long-term pain as well.
Yeah, that's if he goes through with it. I go back to this. So if you assume that Donald Trump is a competent businessman, which he is not completely incompetent, because otherwise he would have lost all of the billions of dollars that he's earned. So he's at least competent. And if he's a competent businessman, then he knows that a 25% tariff, yes, would be disastrous for the Canadian economy, but it would also be disastrous for a lot of Americans as well, especially all of the American organizations that use our oil and gas and any of the other imports that we take, steel and everything that comes out of Canada. So it's going to hurt them as well. So sure, if he's going to put in a 25% tariff, I imagine that's going to be very, very time limited. Otherwise, the entire country is going to turn against him very, very quickly. And Congress and the Senate are going to turn against him very, very quickly, because the Republicans will become deeply unpopular at a rapid rate. So that's one thing that I would put forward. The other thing that I would say is, when you're playing poker or any type of game where you are playing psychological games over your opponent, and Donald Trump loves to play these games, if you're bluffing and you notice that your opponent might believe you, you usually double down to try to exert even more pressure. And that's what I see Donald Trump doing. If he were to try to do anything in terms of annexing Canada through economic forces or anything like that, he's going to need the help of Congress. He's going to need the help of the Senate. And I don't believe for a second that they would actually back him in that. So I think this is a lot of posturing from Donald Trump. But the problem is he's the next president coming in, and you have to at least pay attention to what he's saying.
And how do you think Tonya Pierre Poilievre at this point should be reacting? We've seen a strong tweet that he posted yesterday, as every political leader did in this country. We've seen him say that Canada will never become the 51st state. Donald Trump responded to that saying, "I don't care what the leader of the Conservative Party has to say," and he obviously doesn't show him any respect. So, how do you think Pierre Poilievre, as a prime minister in waiting, should be reacting to what we're now seeing, which, regardless, as you know, it could be a bluff, but at the same time, I think there needs to be a response, and it is unprecedented for Canada. So, what do you think he should be doing?
I think he handled it well, actually. He answered that, he was for Canada, in support of Canada, and he left Donald Trump's name completely out of that tweet, if you notice. So he's not giving Trump the attention, but he's bolstering Canada. He's standing behind Canadians. And honestly, I think that's what you do when somebody is kind of bearing down on you like this. You don't give them the attention. You don't make it about them. You make it about supporting your country, your countrymen, your economy.
When you contrast that to Justin Trudeau's response, right? There's not a snowball's chance in hell that we're going to be. So
that's immature.
If you contrast those two responses right there, one is from someone that sounds like they're literally screaming through their through their keyboard, they're screaming through their phone, and one is very measured, and it's a perfect way to deal with somebody like this. And Pierre knows how to deal with people like Donald Trump, because Pierre knows how to be like Donald Trump when he needs to be, when he is the antagonist. That's not going to be his role going forward. His role is to provide calm, stability, and leadership to Canadians. So I agree. The fact that he didn't even mention Donald Trump's name, he just said, yeah, that's not going to happen. This is what I'm going to do. You don't give it air, and you don't give it oxygen and any response. And if I were Pierre, I wouldn't respond to Trump's response. I would just focus on moving forward and do what I do, because if you don't respond to it, it's not going to come back.
What do you guys make of the announcement that he made before saying that he would use economic force to absorb and annex Canada? He said that he would be willing to, he wouldn't rule out using military force to annex Greenland. Now, on a pure foreign policy basis, if that were to happen, in my opinion, there would need to be, again, another serious decision as to how Canada approaches this, and how a Canadian government would handle something like that, regardless of if it's military or not. In previous eras, the Canadian government would be very forceful in their reaction to something like that. Are we in a place where we just have no recourse whatsoever, and we're just along for the ride, and we're going to just watch what happens?
Well, again, this is where we love relying on our knowledge of procedure. So Donald Trump can say that he's going to use military force to annex Greenland. He can't without congressional approval. He actually has to get approval from Congress in order to do that. So now, if Congress says, sure, we'll back you, Donald Trump, no problem, okay, now it's a different conversation. And if the U.S. really wanted to march up here, is there anything we can do? No, absolutely not. There's nothing we could do from a military standpoint. But the difference is if the United States wants to essentially rebrand themselves as another, totalitarian and dictatorship state, they want to rebrand themselves as essentially the new Germany of 1939. Have at her. If that wants to be your legacy, that's totally up to you. But there's no way that the American people would let that happen, and there's no way that Congress would let that happen. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, it's bluster, and unfortunately, I think it's going to be damaging the reputation of the United States.
I would agree, and I think it already has. In fact, you've already seen reports and posts from European world leaders saying that these comments at that press conference are very strange, bizarre, and we're not very happy to hear this sort of thing. Tonya, do you think do you think all of this is actually about Justin Trudeau feeling as though he needs to help continue negotiating on behalf of Canada with Donald Trump as he comes into office? Like how much of this do you think is about that? And if there wasn't any threat, do you think he would have just bowed out and called an election?
If I had to guess, I would say that Trump probably doesn't like Trudeau very much, especially from all the things that he and his ministers have been saying over the past 4 years. They thought Donald Trump was gone for good. They thought he was out of office. They thought those criminal charges would stick and that he'd never be president again. And, well, they were wrong. So now that Trudeau is weak, that the Liberal government is weak, I think Trump is taking every opportunity to kind of stick it to them. He's trash talking them. He's intimidating them. He's making them look like fools on the world stage. I think that's exactly what this is.
Yeah, I think it's almost personal between Donald Trump, and I think he's reveling every minute of this, and he sees the over-the-top reaction in Justin Trudeau's tweet, and I think Donald Trump is sitting back in his chair, and he's just smiling and laughing at him.
But do you think that Trudeau genuinely believes that he is the man that can best handle Trump, and that if there was no issue, Trudeau would just back off? Because I get the impression that a lot of what we're seeing now is actually because of the posts that Donald Trump has made, the decisions that he has made, right? Freeland cited that as the reason for her resignation, and it was that resignation which mounted the Liberal caucus revolt 2.0 that took Trudeau down. But he could have just left, right? He could have just left and kept Parliament intact, but he didn't do that. So why do you think that is? Is that because he wants to be able to deal with Trump as Trump enters office for the next, what could be 2, 3, probably at least a month and a half, 2 months?
I don't even know if it had anything to do with Trump. I think that if Trudeau had stepped down and there was no Liberal leader and Parliament was not prorogued, as in we went back to session on January 27th, the leaders of the opposition parties would have voted non-confidence. They would have gotten their parties to vote non-confidence, and we'd be going to an election even sooner with the Liberal Party in an extremely weakened state. I think a lot of this is Trudeau trying to protect the Liberal Party, trying to protect them from this catastrophic loss that he had a huge hand in creating.
Well, but to your point, Harrison, on the main question, yeah, I think Justin Trudeau he is still the Messiah. I think he thinks that he is the only person to be able to deal with Trump. I think the fact that it's obvious that he's taken some of these tweets from Donald Trump personally, that he's been publicly embarrassed, both by Donald Trump and on Saturday Night Live, is that he feels that, he's the fighter and he needs to stand up to the bully, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's driving him nuts that he's losing this battle, and he's not going to be having that. It's an interesting question, because if we didn't have the tariffs, would Freeland have resigned at that point? That's an interesting question. So, and I don't think we'll ever get the answer to that. But I think you're right. I think he probably does have this narcissistic need to say nobody else can deal with this, only I can, and nobody understands that I'm the only one that can deal with this.
And it's no longer just Saturday Night Live going after him. CBC's 22 Minutes is going after him quite relentlessly. And I have to say, sometimes they're a bit corny, right? But some of the recent bits that 22 Minutes have done on Justin Trudeau have made me laugh, genuinely. I never thought I would laugh at CBC comedy, but like so many things in this country, here we are, and I guess things are changing. We're going to have to leave it there, but I want to remind the viewers about this new poll question linked in the top comment of the video. The poll question is this: will the court uphold prorogation in the upcoming court challenge? Let us know your answer to that poll question. Also, get involved in the comments section. We may read your comment on the next episode of the Northern Dispatch. But until next week, it's all we have time for. We'll leave it there. Thank you all for watching.